good morning, good afternoon, and good night for wherever you are in the world. You've got me coming from Toronto in Canada and Ray Uzishin coming from Texas. And today's session is on creating infrastructures for long-term digital preservation. And of course, there's some magic in that. And Ray's going to share some of his magic because we don't know what the future is going to hold. I remember when we backed up things to tape and DVDs and CD-ROM. So now it's a very different world. And Ray comes to us as digital collections and digital services librarian at the Texas State University Libraries. He's currently there, and he previously serves as director of libraries for the American Public University System, head of digital and learning technologies for the University of West Florida, and web services librarian for the University of Miami Libraries. He clearly likes to be in warm places because I know he's from Winnipeg, which we call Winterpeg, and it's very cold there. He's got a PhD from NYU in media studies, an MBA in information technology management, and an MLIS from the University of Western Ontario. He's chaired groups for the American Society of Information Science and Technology and served as a reviewer for the Gates Foundation, IMLS, EDUCAUSE, Open Repositories, Campus Foundations, and currently serves as an active member of IFLA's Standing Committee on Information Technologies. His specialties include information systems, online education, information visualization, digital research systems, multimedia digital libraries, and new IT infrastructure implementation. We will hopefully have some time for questions at the end, so put them in the chat wherever you are, in Feedloop or in Zoom, and I'll collect them up. If we don't have time for questions, or anyway, we're going to do it anyways, Ray will be in the this session's, under his name, networking session for a few minutes after the session so that you can have a private conversation with them. We call it the rush the stage thing. Every speaker at Internet Librarian always has people walk up after the session to ask the speakers questions. And we have these little lobbies, networking rooms, so you can talk to the presenters at this great conference. So I'm going to shut up now. Oh, sorry, I'm Stephen Abram. I'm your moderator for this track. I'm going to turn off my video and mute myself so that you can listen to Ray and all of his insights into infrastructure and long-term preservation.
Thank you very much, Steve, and I really appreciate actually the warm introduction here. I am just going to start up my slideshow, so hopefully everybody can see it. And I will change the display headings so I can see it. And I will be speaking to you today well, first of all, my name is Ray Uzishin again. I am Director of Collections and Digital Services for Texas State University Libraries. And I will be speaking to you today about creating infrastructures for long-term digital preservation for libraries, museums, and memory institutions. And I really want to make this quite pragmatic. So this isn't future visioning. This is really a pragmatic recipe to get you started creating your long-term digital preservation infrastructures. So I wanted to begin by asking the question, what is long-term digital preservation storage? Simply put, this is very long digital storage, 10 years or more. Libraries, special collections, and university archives, we now collect print and other media. Increasingly, we're gathering and collecting digital information, media, and data. There are new millennial perspectives with regards to digital storage standards in line with research library standards that I'll be talking about. And this is an introduction to some of those areas that are beginning to occur. So first of all, digital preservation in libraries follows a unique three-legged stool library model. That's predicated on three different legs of that stool. And this is a model developed by Ann Kenny and Nancy McGovern, originally from Cornell University in 2007. Now, that three-legged stool consists of organization, which leverages existing human and consortial resources in the libraries to build on archival and stewardship expertise; technology, which synthesizes technological capabilities to meld with traditional library archival and preservation models; and resources. And that means utilizing library, IT, network, and human resources. So here what I've done is put together a sort of a graphic of communications media. And you could think of it as the very, very long-term communications media in terms of their lifespan. And I began with the Stone Age and stone. Our original communications media from 500 BC. And this is the Rosetta Stone on the top left from 2000 BC. And the far right, you see the internet. Now, the bottom of the chart shows time going forward from stone to vellum to paper to microfilm to magnetic tape, and the computer era beginning with CD-ROM storage and DVD storage. And then the spread of the internet beginning in 1998. Now, the left-hand side also is durability of media in hundreds of years. So as you can see, at the very left part of the chart, we've got the Rosetta Stone, which has lasted us longer than 2,000 years. And as time goes forward with vellum and then books and then the degrading quality of book paper, the durability of that media decreases. Now, a really funny thing happens in the 20th century with the development of microfilm. The durability of media goes down from literally hundreds and almost 1,000 years with our even early books to less than 50 years with the advent of microfilm and magnetic tape. As we get to CD-ROM storage and DVD already in the mid 80s and the late 90s, our storage durability of this medium really lasts less than 20 to going on 10 years if we're lucky to have it. Following that, with the spread of the internet, you're lucky if a site actually lasts longer than 5 years. So this storage and thinking about digital preservation is extremely important in terms of the library's historical role. And the funny thing is, we're not doing a lot of it right now. Now, just to talk about some of the considerations in terms of long-term digital preservation solutions. There's technological considerations, and here you can think about the technological diversity of formats we have, and there's really a lot of formats. There's digital replication, and the principle that most generally everybody knows in digital preservation is the Locke's principle, which is lots of copies keep stuff safe. Then there's the digital auditing and repair, and that basically means the bits that you said you were putting into the digital storage repository are actually there. And that means conducting bitsum auditing and also repair of those files if they don't make it online. Beyond that, there's disaster planning, and geographic distribution of files is very important, as well as best practice standards and succession agreements. That means if your institution goes down, that there's a succession agreement. Beyond that, if you have a change of dean or VP or library administrator, and the next administrator comes and they just don't think digital preservation is that important, you really need to have that succession agreement in place beforehand. So there's also unique characteristics of technology of long-term digital preservation. And any digital preservation technology must allow for migration and preservation of formats for long-term storage, risk mitigation for data and content, and that means those multiple bit level copies stored in disparate locations, as I've mentioned, preferably geographically, administratively, and technologically. And finally, leveraging the library's role traditionally as historical keeper of the scholarly and historical record. And now that has shifted into the digital arena. We all know that as librarians and preservationists, but a lot of the administrators and IT people have very, very little understanding of that capability and also a traditional role of libraries. So that marketing angle is also very important. So to begin pragmatically here, and I'm going to talk about primary steps in beginning this type of infrastructure. You're going to need to start with what I call a digital preservation working group. And I'm going to start here with Texas State University's library example and give you a little background in history of this group and think about digital preservation policy and infrastructure in these terms. Now, a digital preservation group provides oversight and direction and responsibility for two major areas. One is the technology, and two, equally important, is the policy infrastructure. We've been working on this type of policy and technology for now, it's the past 6 years. We began in 2015, and it consisted of members of the library's digital and web services, the technology department, the digitization lab, the institutional repositories, and then more traditional areas of university archives, the special collections, and the library general collections. You're really wanting to get a group of these people together and begin basic tasks. And those two basic tasks are going to be, the first ones are conducting a general policy document and survey and creating a policy, general policy document. I've included the policy document that we created so you don't have to begin from scratch. And there's a lot of details involved here that I'm not going to go into, but that policy document is going to be important for getting the group together, starting to think seriously about digital preservation, and starting to think about the policy side of things. The other half of that, equally important, is to start with the technology. And that will be creating dedicated local server space for your preservation files. Again, this is not rocket science at this stage, but it's definitely a first step in terms of working with technology, starting to talk about digital preservation files, and starting to think about library IT, university technology, or your technology department's resources. Following this, the investigation of new digital preservation tools, platforms, and resources is going to begin. Now, a main tool that has shown up that I'm not going to talk about all of these, but I'm going to talk about the main tools, and a main tool that has shown up, and if you have not been in the world of digital preservation yet, Archivematica is a very important middleware standard for digital preservation, metadata, and file integrity. It's actually central to digital preservation. And so beyond your files, you're going to need a service or a software infrastructure to bundle microservices for normalizing files. That means moving files forward, managing metadata, and verifying file types, the bit level integrity checksums that I'm talking about. And I'm getting a little technical, but it's important to start to begin to hear some of these words. We began with setting up on Archivematica on what was called Linux Ubuntu, an early version of Ubuntu. But since then, we've moved to a more standardized format of the Linux Red Hat platform, which has been released. And that's a very solid format, so I can very much recommend that one. For a 2-year period, we had university and archives and special collections learning, experimenting with, and utilizing this software. It could be done in a shorter timeline, but there is a lot to learn, and there is a lot to take up. So I would suggest at the minimum 6 months, and if you're going to actually do a thorough investigation of things with your group, 2 years is not a bad time. Simultaneous to this, you're going to also, again on the policy side of things, you're going to need an initial digital storage needs estimate. This is going to consist of all of your main archive, all of your main areas designated for digital preservation: university archives, special collections, general collections, and you're going to tally up how many existing files, or the file space size of the existing files that you have already digitized or in digital format, and how much new space each of these areas is going to need. And that recommendation is going to be very, very important in terms of budget requests and servers and storage budgets. Now, for us, just to give you an example, we needed 60 to 70 terabytes of initial digital storage required as a budget request. And then we were also requesting 10 to 12 new terabytes a year. And that's going to be a pill to swallow for your administrators. So it's good to get that done fairly early so they can start thinking about that in terms of long-term budget planning. If it's possible for you, there's a lot of consortia popping up all over the country, and a consortia is very good to join in terms of digital preservation. The main consortia for us in Texas is the Texas Digital Library, and that we joined that fairly early on, a year after we started our digital preservation strategy, and that they formed in 2016. And they're very important in terms of collegial friendships, seeing what other universities across your state or region or province in Canada are doing, and setting up also infrastructure committees, which you'll be able to participate in for sharing of information, but also for infrastructures that you may be joining in terms of some of the necessities for digital preservation that I'm going to speak about a little bit more. So these are very important organizations to be thinking about. Following having set up that, and that's going to take you minimum the first 1 to 2 years. If you really are going gangbusters, I suppose you could do all of that in 1 year, but I would give yourself 2 years to do that. Following that, and once you've got a little of the budgetary money going, you're going to set your committee working on a storage infrastructure recommendation. And this is really tasking the digital preservation group with looking at the continually changing landscape of digital preservation and making a recommendation with regards to the storage infrastructure, the permanent storage infrastructure. So, and this is going to consist of 4 steps: conducting an environmental scan to identify those library digital preservation storage options, comparing your peer groups and national best practice, narrowing that focus to pragmatic options for suitable for your library or museum or university library in our case, or special library or public library if you're doing it that way. And then you're going to forward that recommendation to your AVP or vice president or dean of the library or director for, again, budgetary review. And these are going to be permanent budget lines that are going to be going forward. So these are very important to get on the table early. So just to give you a bit of flavor of the 4 steps, we started with an environmental scan of our peer institutions to see what they were doing in Texas. And we didn't see a consolidated market at the time. This was done, I suppose, in around 2017, and the market wasn't quite as consolidated. They were all over the map in terms of digital preservation solutions. So it did not help us that much in terms of making any decision. From there, though, we were able to begin to narrow our focus. And I'm going to talk about the narrowing of focus in terms of the class of candidates. It's not so much the solutions yet. So the class of candidates are, and this is going to be pretty well the same for everyone, the class of candidates are going to be divided into an outsourcing option for one choice, for your second choice, an in-house option, if you're going to try to do this digital preservation thing all yourself and do it in-house, or a mixed option that's going to combine outsourcing, the cloud, consortial solutions, and your in-house staff. And I'll talk about the pluses and minuses of all of those a little bit more. So option 1 that we looked at our time, the main player was Preservica. You know, there were many benefits in terms of this all-in-one type of outsourcing option. It really established archival best practices, and it was recognized by library peers. But for us, in our budget, it was just too expensive. And we knew that our dean or AVP, especially for starting our program, was not going to put down $35,000 to start and not have any of the staff that we had in-house working on things. And there was also a loss of control in these kind of black box solutions. The second alternative, and I suppose diametrically opposite option, was to do everything in-house. And again, this had several benefits in terms of proven relationships were there with your university IT resources, or for us, our IT resources. There was storage that our university had for working files. But the downside of the whole thing in terms of doing everything in-house, and I have to mention this to everybody, that there was not a specialization in place. So our IT were not specialists in digital preservation. There were also requirements in terms of digital preservation for, as I was mentioning, distribution of geographic, administrative, and technological storage that we just did not possess with the university. And finally, their 30-day window for preserving items, even though they said to us eventually they would expand to a couple years, still did not cut it for this type of ongoing storage that you're going to need, hopefully, for the entire future, like those books or the Rosetta Stone that I showed in the first video, that actually lasted and was able to be translated for thousands or hundreds at least of years. Our third option, and this was the one that I want to recommend and for everyone, especially in terms of classes, was a mixed option, actually combining consortial options with in-house solutions with outsourcing solutions. So we used one of the national geographically distributed preservation networks, Chronopolis, which had several nodes at UC San Diego, National Center for Atmospheric Research, University of Maryland, TAC in Texas, that was very close to us. And so we were assured that our storage and our digital material would be stored at disparate locations in case of a disaster. We were also interested in terms of that mixed solution that I was talking about in terms of leveraging the consortial possibilities of other organizations that could help us in terms of digital preservation. So we also opted for joining several consortium, among them the Texas Digital Library, LYRASYST, DuraSpace, which runs also DuraCloud, and all of these organizations helped in providing strong library support through 4 academic library focused organizations, Chronopolis, TDL, DuraSpace, and LYRASYST, for long-term viability and strong peer support. Beyond the human resources we had working on this type of project, and I would say that the committee consisted of about 12 people, and out of those 12 people from the different areas, 3 of those people were working on this project for, I would say, 20% of their time. So not a huge amount, but a definite longer sustained effort that was worked into their HR and professional profiles. The budgetary request to get this started was really modest in terms of trying to start this beyond our membership in the consortium of Texas Digital Library, which I think costs us $12,000 a year. But beyond that, and provides a whole host of other options for our state and consortia around the country, and I suppose also Canada, provide those types of leveraged resources. Our request really became quite modest. So it was originally, the request was $3,500 for the initial setup and onboarding, including 2 terabytes to start. And then the next year's approximately $2,785 per year to add that storage. Now, I'm not talking about all of the long-term work or the larger numbers here that I mentioned previously, because processing of these files takes quite a long time. And the staff right now is not tasked full-time on these staff. So we're on these digital preservation efforts. So we're working our way up to actually get rid of the digital preservation backlog and then increase staff time. But this is the excellent way to wrap up the program. And I think it's a perfect time right now for beginning this program. Because remember, parallel to beginning this type of program, you're going to also be needing, if you haven't started this type of program, buy-in by your directors, AVPs, IT heads. So it's best, unless you're a Harvard or a Stanford, not to jump into the deep end, but actually to start more modestly and work this progressively into your budget. So right now we're at 2022. We've got a very strong, I would say, foundation in terms of our digital preservation, long-term infrastructure. And we're starting now in our next 5-year cycle to add different directions. And I'll talk about these a little bit in beginning to conclude. So web archiving, digital forensics, and email archiving are our next 5-year plan type of initiatives. Web archiving, as most of you know, is the process of collecting portions of the World Wide Web to ensure information is preserved in an archive for future researchers. It employs web crawlers for automated capture. And the largest web archiving organization, I'm sure most of you are familiar with, is the Wayback Machine, or the Internet Archive. Now, just to give you an idea here in terms of some of our collection priorities, because I am in Texas here, our special collections is founded on 4 pillars. We're an ARL library, actually, and I should give a plug because we're the newest ARL library for some of the technological work we've been doing. We're the 125th ARL library, and that just happened last year. Our special collections is founded on 4 pillar priorities, and that's mainly to do with our regional area, Texas and the southwestern US, though that does dip into international and global areas. So we possess the archives of, and those 4 areas I should mention are southwestern literature, southwestern film, southwestern and Texas music, and Mexican and southwestern photography. Bonus if you know who these people or where these photographs or areas come from, but I'll just mention some of these names. Willie Nelson, and these are all areas that our archives hold large holdings in. Willie Nelson, the singer, Cormac McCarthy, the internationally known author, Selena, the famous singer, and our archives are always being used for Selena. The events at Waco, if you remember it, and I'm not going to go into it, but again, these are areas that there have been TV series on, and the archives are very used. And then Chicano and Latin American and Mexican American literature and diversity. And this is Sandra Cisneros, one of our Latin American and Mexican American authors, and her national bestseller and her archives are kept at Texas State. We also hold large Mexican and Southwestern photography archives. So all of this is very, very important in terms of both digital and paper traditional preservation. But beyond that, the fan sites, the review sites, the article sites are not having long, stable lifespans. So these are very important to preserve. The second major area for our web archiving has to do with university archives, and our university, in terms of crawling our Texas State site and preserving and partnering with our university researchers, colleges, and departments and institutional records in terms of potentially beginning archiving all of these areas. We're really in an experimental stage with all of these areas and setting the infrastructure right now for our next 5 years to have that solid infrastructure. Right now, we're doing our R&D phase with 2 major platforms for web archiving. One is Archive IT, which is the commercial aspect of the Wayback Machine, and that's been launched since 2006, and we're starting to work with that, and also with another similar program called Web Recorder. We haven't finalized what we've decided on. It's the archivists and special collections people are doing their due diligence and taking a couple years to actually look at the different softwares and the viability of each one. So it's not good, I guess, to mention, it's not good to make quick decisions in long-term digital preservation. You're really trying to think as deeply as you can on the long term. To begin to conclude, and just for making your case for the deeper rationale to your higher ups for long-term digital preservation and storage infrastructure. And here's my plug for it. Long-term digital preservation provides a new level of service. It's now expected by donors, researchers, faculty at the university for us, and students. It's a necessary focus for research libraries and other libraries special collections, museums, increasingly. It connects the library with state and national library technology organizations, everybody from the Coalition of Network Information to the Digital Preservation Network to Chronopolis. And it places your library in line with other leading edge institutions right now around North America working in these areas on national and global areas. And if you haven't begun, it's a really great time to begin these initiatives because the software is worked out, the preliminary work has been done in setting infrastructure, so you do not have to begin from scratch, and there's lots of help available. So with that, I've put here a number of long-term digital preservation software and storage related links that I talked about in my presentation or tried to touch on a few of them. And here I've also put a bit of a deeper bibliography on long-term digital preservation standards, resources, articles, and presentations. I want to highlight the ISO policies that I mentioned and Kenny and McGovern's great three-legged stool article. Also, the Library of Congress is fantastic in terms of their digital preservation site. Here's the link to the policy of our digital preservation working group, which you're free to copy and remix as you would like. This is an article I just published in September 2021 by one of the sponsors of actually this conference, Computers in Libraries and Information Today. And I've got a feature-length article that goes into actually much more detail than some of the information I've been able to present in the presentation today. And I've got actually another link for that we use for buy-in, again, that you're free to use to make the initial case for your digital preservation storage infrastructure. With that, I'd be happy to take questions and comments, and thank you for coming to my presentation.
Oh my goodness, thank you, Ray. That is so exciting to see you make recommendations and links to further learning. It's one of the goals of this conference to be able to connect people to people and connect people to information. We're doing it online, even though we just love the ability to meet with people at our live conferences in lobby bars and coffee shops and over dinner.
Definitely. And I miss it, Steve.
Yeah, oh, I can't tell you how much this extrovert misses it. I don't see any questions in the chat, but if anyone has any, we've still got a lot of people online, they can put it in there, or they can meet you in the networking suite and have a live conversation. So
Well,
are there any?
Well, if there's no questions, I will be happy to meet you in a networking suite. I'll try to get a coffee beforehand, maybe. Oh, here's a question that came in. Are you preserving Texas State University Library social media? Well, that was actually a great question. It's actually my last slide. I think I had right over here at the very bottom, if you can see it, it says potentially beginning archiving Texas State important social media, Twitter and Facebook. So we are actually beginning R&D experimentation on that. We've gone to a couple presentations actually sponsored by the Texas Digital Library. They had an excellent presentation from Baylor, and I guess this speaks to the power of being in a consortium of member groups that have actually really started on those media, and we're actually trying to follow some of their recommendations. their recommendations, and I'm not actually on the ground floor level of actually doing uh, uh, preservation of social media, is that everything should not be preserved right now, since there's so much to do and so many priorities. But for very, very important events, and especially with regards to your university and university events, it is important to start sampling social media and preserving that way. So the archivists and special collections people are actually selectively beginning, actually trying to do some of that work. And the whole goal in the next, well, 5 years, but especially in the next 2 years, is to develop methodologies that are going to be solidified into policy. So that's exactly one of the areas for that 2022 to 2027 stage that we're at right now, that we were at previously with our 2015 to 2021 to setting the storage infrastructure. Right now, we're beginning to set this policy and infrastructure stage with social media, web archiving, email archiving, and digital forensics. That's where we're at.
I think this is an interesting opportunity to safely play with the local archiving of the university's social media presence. I'm very proud of the Library of Congress, which for over a decade has been archiving all national election materials, websites, and social media to keep it safe in their independent mandate of Congress. It's a fascinating opportunity to be the collector, and the thing I admire most about our profession, subversiveness, to protect the thoughts and words and comments of everybody in a space, so future historians, but also current people, can know what's going on. So maybe you'll have an opportunity in the future to be in, and if your policy includes academic and intellectual freedom as a principle, it can create an opportunity to archive Texas state elections and local county elections and keep the first draft of history in those websites. It could be fascinating.
Definitely. And I guess I keep twigging on the consortia, the power of the consortia, and I guess this really speaks to it. In the Texas Digital Library, one of our members is University of North Texas, and they have a huge effort with regards to actually preserving also that election website data. So all of those websites that surround the elections, all of the websites that have to do with pros and cons, they take it upon themselves to actually, apply for grants just for that specific area. And I think, it speaks to the fact that really, once you're starting on this road, you're really going to have to start to pick and choose in terms of, that's why it's very worthwhile to get that group together, because that group is going to develop, okay, well, we've got to actually pick our priorities here in terms of that type of digital preservation development. And it really helps to have that group on both the local level and, if you can, on state or say provincial levels to divide up the work, because there's definitely a lot of work to be done.
One of our audience members, who's also a digitization digital vault demon, Richard Hulser, is pointing out that you've given a great example of why libraries, archives, special collections, and museums need to collaborate. And I think you're working internationally and nationally with consortia that involve all those kind of organizations, can build a system that meets the needs of all of us without creating an archipelago of digital vaults.
Definitely. And I serve right now on the IFLA IT subcommittee, and I noticed that there's other people there from the Library of Congress, Australia, Canada, Western Europe, and also the less represented second world and third world, the global north and the global south. So it really is a time to begin working together on these types of, especially cultural, socio-political, heritage type of collections, because it's everyone could be helping everyone in and benefiting in a lot of different ways. So I'm a huge believer in those types of
And
consortium.
even things like restricting ourselves to the Western canon or the English language canon removes voices, and the tools will be there to search Spanish language or Asian language materials in the future if we build it right now. So Ray, I'd love to thank you. I am thanking you for your education today, your sharing, your recommendations. It's been excellent, and we really appreciate it. Thank you. Someone in the comments says you were amazing, and we have to close out now. But please, anybody who wants to talk further with Ray, sort of off the record, we won't record you. You can go to the networking suite and in feed loop and have a conversation. So Ray, thank you very much. And thank you to the audience. If you're wondering how to fund this, the next session at 3 o'clock is funding with a couple of the key top fundraisers who are friends of mine. And I think there's a lot to learn there. So
Well,
thank you. And
thank you very much, Steve. It's been a real pleasure.
Be safe.
You too.